In the 19th century, the city of Akron grew into the axis of national industry that we know today. Long before the factories and mills rose up along the riverfront, however, this region formed the edge of the western frontier. Here, the surveyors of the young republic explored new landscapes, encountered native people, and imagined a national future more expansive than anyone in the East had dreamed. The Perkins family of Akron played an integral role in this era of American history. Over 4 generations, Akron's founding family would yield generals and explorers, industrialists and agriculturalists, and politicians and philanthropists. On Mutton Hill, the Perkins family made their home. From this hillside, they bore witness to an ever-changing city and nation. And it was here that they crossed paths with one of the most famous and controversial abolitionists of the anti-slavery movement. Today, the historic homes of Mutton Hill are known primarily for their famous residents. In the 19th century, however, this hillside was recognized as much for the fine stock of sheep that were raised here as it was for the esteemed figures that lived within its walls. For over a century, Ohio families cultivated the land, shared stories, broke bread, and watched history unfold from here on Mutton Hill. At the end of the 18th century, a Connecticut land surveyor named Simon Perkins was appointed by the Erie Land Company to survey its land holdings to the west of Pennsylvania. As he explored the landscape of the Cuyahoga Valley, Simon took note of its ancient routes of passage. Perkins believed this system of waterways could be utilized to unite a growing nation. He advocated for a canal route that would cut through the Cuyahoga Valley. In 1825, Perkins and fellow Connecticut settler Paul Williams donated 100 lots of land at the summit of the canal to the state of Ohio, founding the city of Akron. By the time Simon Perkins arrived in northeastern Ohio, the Mingo and Delaware tribes who once settled there were gone, relocated by war. Though much of these tribes' cultural imprint would be lost, their mark would remain carved into the landscape in the form of the portage path. To connect the region's northern and southern waterways, indigenous travelers had carried their canoes by foot across the valley, carving a portage path that was followed for centuries by subsequent native populations. The portage path shaped the blueprint of the Ohio and Erie Canal system, as well as the city that would rise up around it. It runs through the Perkins homestead, where Simon Perkins' sons and grandsons would raise their families. Today, it is one of the lasting imprints of indigenous people in Akron, and one of the oldest continuous marks of human civilization on the landscape of North America. In 1834, Simon Perkins sent his oldest son, Simon Jr., who would eventually be known as Colonel Simon Perkins, to serve as his agent and overseer of the fledgling city of Akron. Like his father, Simon Jr. loved animals and the outdoors. He and his wife, Grace Todd Perkins, purchased a 115-acre farm on a hilltop in southwest Akron, where Colonel Perkins hoped to cultivate the land and raise livestock. The homestead would be known as Mutton Hill, after the large flock of Merino sheep that would soon graze there. Colonel Perkins and his family resided in the Great Stone House, where their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren would also be raised. The stone house embodies the bold aspiration and humble resourcefulness of the young American Republic. Like a Greek temple, the stone house is fronted with large columns and a 2-story portico. In contrast with the house's rough-faced sandstone walls, the mansion's classical architecture is a fitting homage to the ideals of classical democracy imported to the western frontier. Though elegant in design, Mutton Hill was not a genteel estate. It was a fully functioning farm. Almost all of the food prepared on Mutton Hill was grown on the property. Corn, potatoes, apples, berries, and pears were all cultivated in Perkins' gardens. Cattle grazed in adjacent fields, and ice was cut from a nearby pond. By the late 1840s, Mutton Hill was home to the largest farm in the county. As one of his grandchildren would remember, Simon Perkins, quote, built everything, farm buildings as well as the house, to last forever. When Colonel Perkins decided to raise sheep on the rocky hillsides of his family estate, All of the agriculturalists in Ohio pointed him to John Brown, a competent and conscientious cultivator of sheep and of wool. In 1844, John Brown moved with his family to the frame house on the Perkins property. Under John Brown's care, Colonel Perkins' flock of Saxony and Merino sheep grew, earning trophies at agricultural fairs and high prices in the wool market. Brown cared little for awards, but he was a careful and devoted shepherd, and his expertise was widely respected. If the sheep were suffering from illness or disease, he would remain awake for days at a time to watch them through the night. During lambing season, his daughter recalled, he would very often bring in a little lifeless lamb and put it in warm water and rub it until it showed signs of life. As Brown traveled more frequently with the growing wool business, he advised his sons to take pride in being shepherds, to keep the fences tight, and to sleep out with the flock every night of lambing season. For 10 years, John Brown called Akron home. Before he became a polarizing national icon of radical abolitionism, Brown helped fugitive slaves escape from bondage to Canada and free states. His property here was used as a safe house on a nationwide network to freedom, the Underground Railroad. Ohio was home to over 3,000 miles of secret routes and trails used by escaped slaves and their allies. At sites such as this one, they would rest and collect supplies to continue on their path to freedom. Though their wool venture seemed primed for financial success, Perkins and Brown's partnership would ultimately dissolve. In the sale of the stock he had so lovingly cultivated, Brown did not seek wealth but fairness. He refused to bargain or compromise on the price of Ohio wool, whatever the circumstances, and his values sparked quarrels and disappointments in a competitive global market. Though Brown's innate sense of justice and his refusal of pragmatic business strategy ended his time at Mutton Hill, it would also lead him to passionately champion the rights of Midwestern farmers and the liberation of the nation's enslaved. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Simon and Grace Todd Perkins sent 3 of their 11 children to fight for the Union cause. After the eldest, George Todd Perkins, returned, he established the Akron Steam Forge Works and helped to finance Akron's first rubber manufacturer, Dr. Benjamin Franklin Goodrich. For 2 decades, George Todd Perkins served as president of the B.F. Goodrich Company, ushering in a dramatic change to the shape and scope of industry in Akron. In 50 years' time, Akron would become the largest rubber manufacturing hub in the world. In the late 19th century, industrialization brought new resources, as well as new challenges, to the lives of individuals and families. Recognizing a community-wide need for childcare, George Todd Perkins' wife Mary founded the Mary Day Nursery, a daycare facility for children of Akron's working mothers. With the help of Mary and George's daughter Mary Perkins Raymond, the day nursery grew to offer a kindergarten and therapeutic support for children with disabilities, before expanding into the Akron Children's Hospital. Through the later decades of the 19th century, the families of Mutton Hill would grow and change, much like the city of Akron itself. Today, Mutton Hill is not an artifact of a long-forgotten past, nor is it a symbol of one family's forward-thinking ambition and progress. In the spaces and memories of Mutton Hill, we discover ideas, events, and individuals, each bearing witness to the extraordinary American synthesis of past and present, of tradition and innovation.